Hi everyone, here today, lovely Strathbran with Wendy, Barrie and Bosse Dahlgren. Probably pronounced your surname wrong.
No.
Pretty
Perfect.
good, actually.
It was very good.
That was good.
Extremely good.
Oh,
You give lessons to
I
others.
spent some time in Denmark, so...
Oh, yes.
So, Wendy and Bosse have written this amazing book, Meadows, all about sustainability, regenerative farming. It's just fantastic. So we use this as our Bible on this project. And Wendy and Bosse are going to talk a little bit more about this book and sustainable farming and everything else. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about your book? And
Yeah.
You tell about it.
Tell me about the book. Well, I've been a cooking campaigner all my life, and then I met this guy who's doing the same, but the food production end, the agricultural end, and it just seemed to make sense to take it right through from the very beginnings, from nature, from managing nature,
Yes.
through to food production and to the plate. And so much of agriculture has become industrialized, with very, very high inputs needed, whether that's chemical or machinery. And we both believe in bringing it back to working with nature with a much lower, really a natural input from what you have within your land, and doing it in a low tech way that's creating a low footprint on the planet as well. And this beautiful land would have been so well managed and produced so much food. And you just need to look around the glens of Scotland to see neglected, sad areas where some people would call that wonderful wilderness, but actually it could have been such wonderfully healthy environmental food production and still be beautiful.
yes.
So that's the sort of essence of what we're portraying in the book, whether it's growing vegetables or rearing animals. You might like to talk about the heritage animals we mentioned.
Yes. But I also want to talk about the surroundings we are in right now. Here is Strasbourg. When we turned in here, you could see this very old birches and the holes in them, place for bats and birds and insects. That's a whole ecosystem in itself. And these birds wouldn't have looked like the way they do if there wouldn't have been grazing animals here. So, and then we heard about the debate, how bad the cows are for the environment, ruminants overall, and they are bad. And yet we can see here how good they are for the environment. And when we look down, Rob has cleared the area for bracken, and we can see how many plants coming where the bracken disappear. So the Scottish landscape looked totally different from what we do today. You can overuse, but you can also underuse a landscape. And I think that's what we want to say in the book, how we work together with the environment and biodiversity, and how we create more biodiversity in a small area. So small holdings are very good in that way, because I do a lot of things, have animals, growing things, so you attract a lot of insects, and with insects came birds and the microlife in the soil and so on. So it's, in my eyes, it's a win-win. And I've been doing this all my life, since I milked a cow first time the summer of 1959. So I've seen what happened, and I was part of this. We call ourselves field biologs in those days, and we could see it was before Silent Spring came out. So we could already then see what happened when they want to make farming more intense. And we could see the small-scale farming where biodiversity was disappeared. Instead, these bigger units came, and with the bigger units, biodiversity was gone.
And we called it Meadows because the meadows really are like a rainforest of the north. And you've seen it here already just by doing bracken clearing with Gabrielle. That already you've got flora, fauna. We've seen frogs this morning, field mushrooms.
The meadow mushrooms.
Sorry, meadow mushrooms.
Yeah.
And you know, it's already starting to come because you let the daylight in.
Yes.
So the meadows was the kind of starting point for the book, the core.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, a meadow is where you get the energy to the rest of the farm.
And you don't see
So
meadows
that's-
nowadays.
No.
Where
No.
did you see hay hanging?
No.
Not very often.
No, you don't.
No.
And yet that food for the ruminants is so special, and you get such special products when you use the hay.
Yes.
Full of nutrients.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Mhm.
Micro minerals.
Mhm.
We don't talk about that. We don't talk about the fat acids. We talk about protein today in the debate, and nutritions talk about protein. Have they never heard about the brain? Have they never heard about cancer and things? So you can stop this and prevent many of these.
Okay.
And from chapter 1 right through, it's all about biodiversity, and that's what you've got here at Strathbrand.
Amazing.
You know, it's that biodiversity at every stage,
Yes.
and helps
It's
the
very
biodiversity for the
Yeah.
next, and
Yeah.
it makes part of the whole ecosystem here.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, so we are back here with Wendy and Bosse, and we are going to talk about why we chose this particular management for this particular land. Like, why do we introduce in animals, and why do we not just cover it all with forests? So, up to you.
Okay. Yeah. No, why you need animals is there's a professor in Sweden at Uppsala at Agriculture University. He was in charge of CBM, is the Center for Biodiversity. And he said the best thing to get rid of species and make them extinct is to take the cattle away from the land. And here we are bringing in, or Rob and Gabrielle bringing in, animals grazing here again, which will make a huge difference to this landscape and will increase the biodiversity. Now people wonder, if you leave it for free development, would it be more biodiversity? No, because then you will have one ecosystem. Here you get several ecosystems in one little area here. So that means you get much more biodiversity, much more species in here, both plants, animals, bacteria, you name it, and it is here. And that's quite fantastic.
Yes, I think it's gonna be really good once everything gets going, and we can see the changes in the landscape year to year. That would be really fantastic indeed.
And the microlife will affect the terroir, and having
Yes.
the native breeds on the land will be good for the microlife, and the whole thing will be in balance
Yeah.
and still produce food and be enhancing the landscape,
Yeah.
not damaging the landscape.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's so important to have the right breed in the right place, which
Yes.
is what you'll be doing. And that's
Yeah.
part of the whole process.
Yes, indeed, and we really want to have something that can bring different angles for food, for that biodiversity and flora as well, because it's really important for us to live in harmony with where we live, rather than, you know, putting our imprint and kind of over, what's the word?
Overuse.
Yeah, overuse and being the dictators that say, well, we want the land to do this for us and this and that. No, we just want to naturally be part of it, and that's what's really important for us.
And you'll benefit from the flavours and
Yes.
the health benefits,
True.
but also have a sustainable way of life,
Yes,
because there's a potential for products as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely, because as you said earlier, even though you can have you know, next door having farms with produce, is not necessarily nutritious and good for you because of the way it has been managed. So
Yeah.
And in the economic climate, it kind of also had a lot of inputs, petroleum inputs, for example. So the less of those inputs as well in the production is good for the economy, good for the planet,
yes,
and you get the best food.
yes,
And
definitely.
And then, of course, you want it, we call it regenerative, when nutrition goes around
Yes.
in the landscape. And here, because the animal brings in manure, which you can use for vegetables, so grain, small patches of grains and so on, you get a landscape that is, like I said earlier, not one. It's several different. So that's why you have a wider range of biodiversity in it. Repeating myself.
It's got beautiful potential.
So guys, tell us more about what's in your book and how that can inspire people to actually do their own food production and their own management of their land.
All right. Well, there's 30 chapters in here. It's
quite packed, yes, indeed.
But it's one that you can sit and have a good read, or you can dip back into, or you can pick a chapter. So we see it as a really, well, we're biased, but there's a really interesting story of land use and food production regeneratively. With anecdotes and real life stories, primary source, but also as a guide, as a handbook for you to actually put it into practice. So we start with the landscapes, because the landscape that you have is the first thing you have to read.
Yes.
You know, you're not down in a valley on a bog, you're up on a beautiful Perthshire hillside. So the landscapes and how you can use these landscapes sensitively for food production, whether they be heather heath or whether they be wetlands, so the landscapes. And then looking at food production, what you could then, the potential, whether you have a small holding or a kitchen garden or a larger farm, it can work on all these scales. And then we look at the different native breeds and what are useful for the land, and the bit of the story about them and the flavours. So each chapter has got a few of my recipes to show, so right yummy. Through to the end point, what you can do with that food that you've got from that landscape.
I tried them. And they're okay.
They're okay.
And something which I know you'll enjoy too, Gabrielle, is a section, quite a generous section on wild foods.
Yeah.
Because if you're following the seasons and you're farming with nature, then you get all the meadow mushrooms and the wildflowers, the berries along the way.
Yes.
They're integral. It's not a sort of urban forager hopping out, to do something one weekend. It becomes part of your preservation and your living off the land over the year.
Yeah.
So those are the sort of things that, and Bosse used a lot of horsepower on his farms.
True.
So the less mechanical, then the more natural inputs. What would you like to add?
No, and people say so expensive to have a horse, but the horse was clearing the land after the cattle and the sheep, so you get rid of parasites.
Yeah.
So instead of using chemical, the horse was out eating, and then they got the energy into when you worked with him and so on. No diesel, no electricity.
Yes.
Just horsepower, and then when he was indoors, he pooed, and you get manure from that too. So I mean, it's a win-win.
Yes, and we also show how you can sort of multiply up sensitively in landscapes. So where you have an apple orchard or a couple of trees, you can have animals grazing underneath. You have a use for the fallen apples. It all interlinks, so nothing is wasted.
Yes.
No waste leaves the land.
Yeah.
No, and this land here, by the way, back to the horses, is that it's you need a light footprint on this kind of land. True. Otherwise, when it comes rain, and it will be compacted, and you will get a lot of rush on the land, and nobody wants it.
No, and in fact, that's something that a lot of startup smallholders have a real issue with, is bracken, like you found, or a rush. And so we give some good ideas as to how to get rid of that as well, in a nature-friendly way.
Yes. Nice.
Yep.
So lots of practical tips on what you come across along the way.
Yeah.
With solutions.
Yeah, and it's a gold mine for everything, and it's such a pleasure to read because it's so beautifully pictured, and I love that book. So.
Thanks, Gabrielle.
Thank you.
Me too. I love it.